Welcome to the Women's Summit on Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. We're going to get started with the Women's Health panel for the Women's Summit. So I want to go ahead and welcome all the panelists and have them introduce themselves. I'm just going to go ahead in order here, and let's start with Joy.
Hi, my name is Joy Marie Mann. I have a show I've done for 5 years on YouTube and Rockfin. I'm an activist and organizer. And about 2 years ago, I unexpectedly became disabled. So, Sabby, thank you so much for having me. And also thank you so much for having a disabled person on this healthcare panel. Sometimes we are not always included in such talk. So I appreciate it.
Anytime, Joy. Elenor?
Hi, I'm Elenor, she, her, and I'm a creative radical and a filmmaker and a journalist. And that's pretty much that in a nutshell. I'm very excited to be here. This is a very important topic of both personally and in my organizing as well.
Awesome. Kim?
I'm Kim Iverson. I host the Kim Iverson Show, which you can find on YouTube and Rockfin and Rumble and Locals. And also I am the host of Risings, the Hills Rising. So that's where you can find me at this point. So, and thank you so much for having me. Great topic.
Awesome. Jimmy? I think Jimmy froze. I'll come back to Jimmy. Marianne?
Hi, I'm Marianne Williamson, and I'm an author and a teacher and activist, and I wrote a Substack that you see the address there on your screen.
I'm Jimmy Sunderland. I'm creative director over at
Jimmy, I think you have a connection issue. You want to log off and log back on? Okay, sorry, Marianne. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I just said I'm an author and an activist, and I wrote a Substack. That's the address there on the screen. And I'm a mom, which I think gives me a particular passion about tonight's topic.
Awesome. So I want to go ahead and get started with the first question. This was actually pretty alarming to me. 8 million adult women who should be screened for cervical cancer haven't had that checkup in the past 5 years. And I want to get this opinion from the panel. What do you think, or why do you feel the reason that some women are not getting those screenings? Because those screenings are incredibly important and life-saving as well. I'll go ahead in order and start with Joy.
I mean, one word, money. 2.5 years ago I woke up with excruciating pain, which I thought was like, I've had kidney stones. I thought it was the same thing. And I was in pain to the point that I was shivering. I was rocking back and forth. I was like screaming. And my husband kept saying, let's go to the hospital. I kept saying, no, I'm not spending the money. I'll just deal with it. I'm taking Tylenol. Nothing's happening. Well, finally he said, look, we're going to the emergency room. That's it. We're going. I don't care. We'll figure something out. I go. Turns out I have a precancerous ovarian cyst the size of a tennis ball. And they said to me, look, and I have insurance, mind you. And they said to me, look, you're going to have to get this out. And I said, well, how much is it going to cost? And they told me with your insurance, only about $2,000. So I went home and they said, well, don't you want to make an appointment? I said, no. And I said, I'll just take my chance. If I get cancer, I get cancer. What am I going to do? And then it was through a process of just accepting the fact. And, you know, one of my girlfriends said to me, Joy, look, if you don't get this taken care of and you do get cancer, it's going to cost more because you're going to have treatments and such. So I went in, I had the operation. It turned out to be even worse than they thought. I had to have my tubes out and, you know, it was very likely cancer. But, you know, looking back at it, I'm just like, kind of, it's sad that so many women are faced with this, that they're like, you know, I might get cancer, but I can't afford to take care of it. So it's a hostage situation. I mean, my story is not rare at all.
Very true. Elenor?
Yeah, I mean, when you sent me these questions, it felt a bit like serendipitous, I guess, because I actually am a cervical cancer survivor. And I was diagnosed at a free clinic in Los Angeles because I did not have health insurance. And the free clinic was one of the few places I could go to actually get care. And you'd have to wait for like, 4 or 5 hours, but you'd eventually get it. And it's thankfully cervical cancer has a really high survival rate, and thankfully I was able to access healthcare because I started working at a recording studio that had health insurance. Otherwise I might not be talking to you all right now. And as Joy pointed out, that's the money issue. But I'd also like to point out that a lot of women don't go because of past trauma with the medical industrial complex. And hysteria actually comes from the Greek word for uterus. So many women are misdiagnosed because it's just considered to be anxiety, or it's hysteria, or you're just being emotional. Your period pain can't possibly be that bad, or this pain can't be that bad, whether it be, during childbirth, which I just went through 3 months ago, or whether it's something else. It's considered to be not that big of a deal, and you're just being hysterical. And, we think that we've come past this point. Oh, that's something that happened in the 1800s, right? No, this is really frequently something that happens. And it's even, it can even be female doctors who say that, this is probably not that big of a deal. Go home and, take a Tylenol and call me in the morning type of thing. So yeah, it's absolutely the fact that it is a for-profit system, which is horrendous. It's horrific. And I think it's also because there is a lot of discrimination against women in this system that really pushes us to gaslight our own symptoms and our own medical issues.
Well said, Elenor. I'm gonna come back to you at the end, Jimmy. Kim, I want to get your take on this.
I want to know from Elenor real quickly, did you have symptoms when or were you just going in for a regular checkup and then they told you this terrible news? I'm just really curious.
I had particularly horrible period pain. And
Okay.
so that's why I went to the free clinic. But
okay. Well, I'm probably like a lot of women and just exactly like this topic where I don't get my regular screenings. And I'm sitting here thinking, listening to Eleanor's story, like, oh man, I don't know when the last time I've been checked, and maybe I got to go get checked because I would hate to get some, bad news and then find out that it's worse news because I haven't been going. But, for me personally, the big reason why I don't go for regular screenings like I should is because I haven't had proper insurance since I've been employed by a big company. And the last time I was employed by a big company was 2013. So since then, I've been independent, an independent contractor all of these years. And so I have to rely on the system, like going into the actual healthcare exchange and the ACA and get my insurance. And so the problem with that is that each year I have to change insurance because the prices change. And so I can't, 1 year it's one thing, and then maybe I get my income changes and I no longer qualify for, for a while there I was on more of like the state program, and then I couldn't afford it anymore because my income went up. And so then I had to switch to a different insurance. And when I switched insurance, I had to switch doctors. And it's just this constant circus of having to find a new doctor and a new clinic every single time. And then when you call them up, they're like, oh, I can't get you in for a month or two or longer. And so then you just kind of forget about it, or something comes up and you have to cancel your appointment because, you're traveling, or, so it's just this, it's very, and then of course, obviously the cost, it's very prohibitive. I just received a medical bill for a different procedure and it was like $1,000, and that's with the insurance that I have. And it's just like that, that's so, how can people afford this? And then especially now, right now we've got rising inflation. So people are just trying to figure out how to pay their electricity bill because the electricity bills have skyrocketed. So it's just bill after bill after bill. And then just this constant shifting of insurance if you're not with a stable employer. And so, you know, for me, it's like, I'm getting married in 3 months. And so I'm like, all right, well, when I get married, finally, I'll have stable insurance because my husband to be has a stable corporate job and I'll be able to get on some get on some stable insurance. But I think just the system, how difficult it is. And then for a lot of women, even if you do qualify for some subsidies in order to reduce the cost of the actual monthly premium, you've got to, all of this proof of income and if you're a contractor or like an Uber driver or something, it's harder to do, harder to gather the necessary paperwork to even get the insurance. So a lot of people just forego it altogether. So I think that is, I think the biggest hurdle is just the system, of course, on top of the cost.
Well said, Marianne.
Well, I certainly support and agree with everything that has been said here. It's primarily an economic problem and also a psychological problem. The economics are simple. Health is one of the many resources in this country where the real opportunities seem preserved for those who have the money. This is why it's horrible that we don't have Medicare for all. It's why it's horrible that we don't have socialized medicine. And also, I think what Kim said is so important. When you don't have health care, it's not just about your health. It's also about the fact that it just takes up so much bandwidth to have to take care of yourself. And then you put on top of that what Elenor talked about, which is women have particular issues of feeling like we won't necessarily be taken care of. And also, a lot of the cancers, breast cancer, uterine cancer, cervical cancer specifically that relate to women, do have to do with this kind of sense that women have that something just isn't quite right in ways that are not easily quantifiable, at least at first, by the medical establishment.
100%. Jimmy, I'm not sure if you heard the question earlier, but the question is about women getting screened for cervical cancer, and why do you feel some women are not getting those screenings?
Am I all right now? Am I good?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, cool. I've never even had a screening for cervical cancer or anything. So I mean, I don't even know what to say about that. I've never even thought about getting one or anything like that. I don't even have health insurance. Like, I am living these questions that you're asking today. So if anything, I'm hoping to learn something.
All right. This is why we have to have these discussions. But this leads me into my next question, because one of the things I've kind of noticed, especially like in the workplace, it seems like as women, we're just kind of sometimes running around in circles. And I noticed that some of my coworkers, they have busy lives. They have to go to work. They have to pick up their kids from daycare. Then they have to rush home in traffic and then cook dinner. And at one point I asked one of my coworkers, well, when do you have time for yourself? And her response was, I don't. And that leads me to this question. Studies show that women who are mothers or caregivers have a greater risk of poor physical health and mental health, including depression and anxiety. And I want to open this up to the panel. Why do you feel this seems to affect women more than men? And I'll just go back up to the top to you, Joy.
So when I was researching this, it said that, and this is from a specific caregiver association, American Caregiver Association, I believe it's called. It says 66% of caregivers are women. So I think that kind of, works in there. But also, I think that, I'm trying to word this so it doesn't sound sexist, but I think, even reading science, articles and stuff, we are typically more willing to share our emotions and willing to be more vulnerable and willing to voice our emotions and our care and things like that. And once you say those things, it becomes solidified. And then you start thinking about them. So maybe people who are caregivers, think about what they're doing a lot. A lot of times it is it is family members. But also we have to think about the fact that most of these people are not getting paid. They are not making a dime for what they're doing, which is where a federal job guarantee would come in. Anyone who wants a job would get one. You, Sabby, would be getting paid right now for doing this panel. That's the beauty of a federal job guarantee. So women who take care of their kids, we know that's a job. People who are caregivers, that's a job. And I think having that income as caregivers would take so much stress, pressure, depression off of people.
I agree. Elenor?
There's so much to say, particularly as I became a mother 3 months ago. And I just thought, just initially with, in the first month of my child's life, he had 4 different doctor's visits scheduled to make sure that he's gaining weight and he's growing and he doesn't, have 8 legs or whatever. And I didn't have any visits scheduled. And I'm like, but I grew a human and I birthed a human. I pushed a human out of me, not to get too graphic, but that happened. And so why isn't something built into the system that makes sure that the person who did that is okay? And this also speaks, I spent half of my life in Sweden. In Europe, there are postpartum visits for the mother to make sure everything from that you're healing properly, but that your sex life is back on track. How's your pelvic floor doing? Are you in pain? Are you able to have sex? Are you willing to have sex? Are you having postpartum depression? How are you mentally, physically, emotionally? And in the US, it's we don't care. You pumped out a child. You have given us more fodder for the capitalist system. Thank you. And move on. Now you can get pregnant again and do it all over again. Mazel tov. Thank you, by the way. But I think that also speaks to the capitalist mindset, right? And how also as women and as mothers, we're also told that we're not being productive unless we are pumping out children and working, and that the idea of just sitting there with your child is not considered productive, when really it's the most productive thing you could possibly be doing. You're laying the foundation for another human being's life. What could be more productive? But it's not quantifiably productive in terms of dollars and cents. And that's why the capitalist system doesn't care. And that's why, of course, they only care about an unborn cluster of cells. Once it's born, they don't care. No daycare, no health care, no nothing. And so I really think that speaks to the systemic rot of the capitalist system in and of itself. And this being tied to the very concept of caregivers, and that predominantly that has been women's work historically, and even in today's world, of course, that's not considered worthy of giving the funds that are necessary to survive or even to thrive.
Jimmy?
Okay, cool. It lags. I live in mountains. My internet is horrible. I'm gonna have to completely agree with everything that Elenor has said. I was watching a TED Talk, doing some research about this last night, and there's a TED Talk called "The Pace of Modern Life versus the Cave Woman Biochemistry." And I think that the way that we live now in 2022, with working and finding things for ourselves and doing things for ourselves, but also coming home and taking care of the family, that adds a double extra stress and responsibility onto our lives, to where it does cause more depression and anxiety compared to men, because we'll feel the responsibility of, okay, I got to get all my work done, but I still got to go home and make sure my kids are okay and they're fed and their homework is done and they're in bed, and all the minuscule things, make sure the dogs are taken care of, make sure everything's clean. It's always just tons of responsibility added onto being equal in society and working and providing and taking care of the family as well. So that's what I feel like that would cause it more than men.
Kim?
Well, I want to give the basic answer of, well, women we don't ask for help, right? This is always what we say was, oh, well, we always take on all this responsibility with the kids and with the parents. And for me, I don't have children, but I do take care of my aging family. So my uncle, I was his caretaker up until he passed away. And that was a giant responsibility, helping him through hospice care. And then I am also very much my dad's caretaker when he needs. And so recently, for example, he caught COVID. He's in his 70s. I had to rush up to Idaho, and everybody was afraid to even go near him. And so I, of course, had to, be brave and go in there and be his caretaker and quarantine with him for like 20 days or however long it took. But we don't ask for help. That's the one thing that we always say. But the issue is it shouldn't be on us to ask for help, because then that's another responsibility on us. Like, we're supposed to then take all this responsibility, and then it's our responsibility to ask the men for help. And the reality is society just doesn't treat men in a way like they're supposed to help, right? So it's like they're only going to help when we ask for help. To be the care, we have to ask them to babysit their own children, or we have to ask them to help with the elderly parents, and then they get really nervous because they're like, what do you want me to do? And oh no, that's kind of weird and gross and too intimate, and I can't handle that. And but it's when I look back at the first time I had to do a job caretaking that was difficult, or gross or inconvenient, I had to learn on the job. Right. They always want to say, well, women, it's intuitive. We know how to naturally caretake, and that may or may not be true. But I stepped up to the challenge because the challenge was presented and no one else was going to do it. I had no choice. And so if we treated men in that same way, I think men would step up to the challenge because they have no choice, rather than us waiting. Right now, I think a lot of society is just, well, they'll just wait. And when the women want the help because they're stressed out, then they'll ask us. And then it's like asking them for help is also, that adds to the layer of stress, right? Because then we have to train them. And we have to teach them. And it's like, oh man, like that's like, I can't take on an apprentice right now when I'm already my stress levels are as high as they possibly can be. But men will step up to the challenge when they have to step up to that challenge. And it's really up to us to put it on them, I think. My father was my caretaker. I was raised by my dad from birth. So, and he was a single father alone. He did remarry at one point briefly when I was like 12 years old, which is the worst time for a man to even think about bringing a stepmom into the family, right? But he stepped up to the challenge when he had to caretake, when he was left with a little girl, and he had and he was like, my gosh, he was like a 30-something-year-old bachelor being left with a little girl. What was he going to do? He stepped up to the challenge, and he took care of me, and he raised me my entire life. And I'm still I call my dad every day. I'm still very, very close to him. So I think it's a societal, I don't know. And I don't even know how we shift that to get it to where there's an equal balance in the burden, especially nowadays when we women work. And so we're working and we're stressed with that. And then on top of that, we're taking on a lot of the caretaking naturally. And even if the men do help, they're not helping as much as the women, and I say this with, of course, the big caveat that I was raised by my dad. So men will step up, and we just have to get to that. It's like a mentality shift, a societal shift is what I would say. On top of the resources and everything, it's a societal shift in mentality. And, when my dad was left with me, this was in the early 80s when men never got children. I mean, the mom could be like, really off the rails, and the court would still give the kid to the mom. And that it took a societal shift for it to get to a point where society said men can do this too. And I'm a living, breathing testament to, there's some questionable times where I'm like, I can't believe I survived that. When my dad was like, let's do this fun thing, Kim. I can't believe I survived, but I did. And I'm here to live. I'm here to tell the tale. So they will step up. We just have to ensure it, I would say. Make it happen somehow.
Well said. Marianne?
I don't think it's just a societal shift. I think American people love our children as much as they do elsewhere. It's an economic and political shift. When Elenor was talking about European countries, I think the average American doesn't realize how little support families get in this country compared to other countries. If you have a system where our government continues to spew this nonsense about running the government like a business, that's the opposite of running it like a family. You know, if you have a corporate bottom line, that's very different than a bottom line that has to do with serving your people. 86% of women have had children at some point. So at this point, what is happening is that when you talk about the stress factor, the mental stress, mental problems that women are going through, it's not only economic, but it's economics that has to do with the emotional burden, the psychological burden that women have, particularly when they are caring for children. We have a society, we have an economic system and a political system that basically thwarts the dreams of our young. Children are not old enough to vote, so they're no political constituency. They're not old enough to work, so they have no financial leverage. So women, millions and millions of American women are carrying the stress of worrying about the health care that their children do not have, the educational opportunities that their children do not have. And as everybody here has said, they're running home, trying to keep it all together. So I think we really need to keep our focus on the fact that these are policies. These are policies that leave out children. It's policies in other countries that enable for those weeks and even months of care, of postpartum care, both for fathers and for mothers. It's policies that have to do with the fact that we do not have universal pre-K. It's policies that have to do with the fact that so many children are living in poverty and so many mothers and children do not have health insurance. We do not have pro-family policies. And I think that the more we realize how much we have been trained to expect so little, I think that will matter. And also, I don't understand why any kind of feminist conversation is so almost afraid to mention children, because this is where so much of the stress that women are going through comes from. A woman having to take care not only of herself, but the emotional, psychological, and physical burden of caring for her children.
Quick question, really quick, to Joy and Kim, because I've had this happen to me often, actually. Have either of you ever been made to feel like you're being selfish because you don't have kids?
Oh,
Yes.
oh, yes.
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 I would say that
Oh
for
my
me, like,
God.
yeah, like I'm always stuck with doing in fact, that's like why I end up being the caretaker for the aging family members, is because it's like, well, you don't have kids, you know, and it's like, that's always what it comes down to.
Oh yeah, and I notice it with my husband too. Like if somebody calls off work, guess who they call? He doesn't have any kids, you know, and it's like, you know, I'm walking down the wedding aisle and people are like, when are you having kids? And I'm like, look, and now, you know, after going blind and stuff, I'm like, I'm kind of glad I didn't. But yeah, no, I mean, you are 100% right. My friends who have kids, they're like my babies and I love them, but like I had to, you know, get my tubes out because it was precancerous, and like that doesn't make me less of a woman. But I think a lot of times that even though it's not intentionally implied, I think a lot of times there is that, you know, that undertone there. Certainly not tonight. But yeah, I totally agree. And Kim, I was raised by my dad too, so we were here.